Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. My name is Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts. I have a different setting behind me. It is 5:30 p.m. Los Angeles time. I came down to visit some friends and do some work. And that's one thing I love about the show is wherever we are, we will find you and we will find each other. And that's one of the strengths of how this was all formed during COVID. Tonight, we're so privileged to have Kyoshi Neil Stolsmark with us. And Kyoshi, let's jump right in with a question. So, the word
Yes.
authentic is a part of your club name. And I love the word authentic long before I was ever in martial arts. It was something I was always seeking. So I want to ask you, what does authentic mean to you, either in or out of the martial arts?
I think our sensei's frozen.
I think our sensei's frozen too.
Yeah, we've had some severe weather here. I hope that's not damaging this.
No, we hear you now, Sensei.
Okay, I didn't hear anything he said.
Okay.
Oh, I just said the word authentic is part of the
Yes.
name of your club. And I wanted to ask, this is a word that means a lot to me, and I think probably all of us. What does authentic mean to you, both in and out of the martial arts?
So authentic means real, and I would like to say real, but it might upset some other people that do different martial arts. But I did on my latest adventure a few years ago. I moved my location of my Watertown school, which has been there since 1989, so 35 years this July, and I put real karate on my building sign because I see a lot of martial arts that they're good for people and everything, but I don't think that they're real. I don't think they're authentic. I don't think of that, and I think they do a lot of good. They do, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way whatsoever. But I just thought it was funny, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and we tend to be relatively positive on the show, but if you want to shit anybody on anybody, you can. But if you don't want to, I'd still love to know what you consider real.
Yeah, I get it. Well, real is I do Okinawan Shorin Kobayashi Shorin. The roots go way back, to 4, 5, 6, 7 generations that we know of, and the people that brought it in or traveled to China to learn it. Maybe it's a lot of it's fables and a lot of it's fairy tales, and but the reality is, if you know who your teacher is, and you know your teacher's teacher was, and your teacher's teacher's teacher, and your teacher's teacher's teacher, and teacher's 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 teacher, that to me means authentic.
Thanks very much. Let's go around the horn on this one. Hanshi Legacy, what makes something authentic or real in or out of the martial arts?
Well, personally, I agree. It's the lineage you're in. If you can trace your teachers back one after the other, you say Matsumura, somebody in his era, that means you have deep roots and you come from the original authentic martial art.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sensei. I absolutely agree with you. And it's not to say that somebody that does not have lineage can't be a really, really good martial artist. Of course they can. But it's just the other reason I chose the word authentic was because it was authentic ancient arts, AAA. So I wanted to be first in the phone book.
Love that. Sensei Suino, you love marketing, you love smart choices like that. What do you think about authentic and real in or out of the martial arts?
Well, wanting to be first page in the yellow pages is definitely authentic. I would add, I agree that the lineage is important. Of course, we all know that people can stray from their lineage, right? So you can be able to count back your teachers from 5 generations, but also staying within the parameters that your teachers set for you. That doesn't mean you can't necessarily create new techniques or explore, but there's core thematic movements in every martial art. There's certain historical precedents, there's certain philosophies, and I think you have to at least pay homage to those to call yourself authentic and not just wander off into any random direction that strikes your fancy.
Thanks, Sensei Sweetum. Sensei Dauphin, where do you go with this?
I agree with Sensei Stolsmark and Sensei Legacy that for you to be authentic, and I'm going to say authentic, not real. I think you need to be able to trace your lineage back. And then I think if you can, it's probably going to be an effective martial art. Whereas if it's just something that's sprung up out of the ground, it's maybe yes, maybe no.
Thanks, Sensei. I took a moment to Google authentic because I'm like, wait, authentic, real. And I love it. It just says as claimed. And I love that, right? Because I think a lot of people are offering karate, not a lot, some that isn't as claimed. And that's where I think karate inherently has a lineage associated with it, or else it might just be Joe's kickbox or whatever, which is fine too. Like we've all talked about.
Yeah.
I think you were right when you said a
I would
lot.
A lot. Thanks, Sensei.
Yeah, I don't think there's a negative martial arts school out there. You know, I mean, a lot of friends that don't have, you know, like a quote unquote traditional or authentic lineage, and they're very nice people, and they offer something, and they do a wonderful job, you know, with teenagers and younger people and stuff like that, giving them something to do other than get in trouble. And you know, these kids turn out to be, you know, really good athletes, and I have absolutely no issue with that. You know, my thing was I always wanted to outsource anybody and everybody. In other words, if I learned some kind of kata, let's say, or a systematic way of doing stuff, I wanted to learn who knows the most about it in the entire universe. And I want to go and I want to meet that person and I want to train directly with them. And I've tried to do that and I've been pretty successful.
That's fantastic. Sensei Dauphin, I want to pop back to you. I just saw a bit of a nod, and I know this is something you and I have talked about on our own chats. When he talked about, you know, the benefit you're giving someone in the community or a place to go after school, and I know you connect with that. What would you, though, Sensei Dauphin, consider to be the bare minimum where it's actually martial art and not just a daycare?
Well, my proclivities towards this are well documented on this show. So when parents ask me, can you help my kid be more confident? I say yes. More disciplined, yes. Braver, yes. Less of a bully, yes. But I do that by teaching them how to fight. And they learn how to fight in a hard way. They learn their katas in a hard way, in a difficult way. And that's how they learn compassion. That's how they learn how to be disciplined. That's how they learn how to be confident. I don't do it with games and fun time dressed in a karate uniform.
Yeah, right on. I want to come back to Sensei Stolsmark. The other thing on your page, and this is something I'm sure we'll end up chatting with the other senseis on the call, it talks about being an instructor of instructors. And I love that. And we've talked about teaching pedagogy and various different things, but I want to ask you, what do you consider to be different about teaching teachers and teaching people who don't want to teach?
The difference? Well, the difference is the instructors that have, like, you know, really nice big programs, they run out of curriculum, right? They run out of things to teach. They run out of new ideas. They run out of excitement. I'll never run out of material. I'll never run out of material. And so it's fun for me to go to my friends that I meet, you know, over the years, met them at tournaments and things like that. And then, of course, when the internet came on, you know, came into our lives, people would, you know, call me or contact me and say, would you come down and teach my people? And so I enjoyed doing that. I still enjoy doing that. I do it a lot. You know, I'm everywhere all the time, and it gives them a chance to, you know, gain some more knowledge. And if they're smart, if they're into it, then they'll say, well, let's spend a little time together so I can pass this on to my students. And, and that's what it's it's been for me. That's how I made my career, really.
And do you think that's because you were going to the source? So if a kata, someone here was an expert or someone here, you were getting what perhaps a more clean transmission from your instructors? What do you think gave you that ability, or why people went to you?
Because I won't give up. I'll try harder than anybody. And I will go to the source. And if there's a source beyond that source, I'll find that source, and I'll go and I'll train and I'll train and I'll train and I'll train, and I'll try and I'll try and I'll try. And I've done that since I was in my 20s, and I'm 60s something now or whatever. And so, time flies when you're having fun. But I've been able to transfer and transmit a lot of knowledge to a lot of people, all over the world. And I love the fact that people call me up from Australia and say, "Hey, can you come and teach at my camp?" Or this and that. So, yeah.
Thanks, Kyoshi. Let's go to you, Sensei Suino. What makes someone a teacher, not just of others, but of teachers? What would they have to do that? You're one of those men.
Well, I think you have to be a little more systematic, because you have to be able to not only show and do techniques, but you have to explain how they work, and you have to be able to, in some way, help those people that are studying with you communicate to their students in the same way. I think there's some difference between a fighter, a hobbyist, and an instructor, and all are respectable in their own way, but an instructor has to be able to do things differently. They have to be able to articulate and encourage, and I'm not sure that's important in either of those other two roles I mentioned. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Sensei Dolphin, what makes someone a teacher, not just of others, but of teachers? What would they need?
I'm going to just pass on that one, Sean, because I just haven't taught that many people who are teachers yet. So I'm going to pass on that one and let the people with more experience answer it.
Thanks, Sensei.
Yeah.
What makes a man, woman, or person an instructor, not just of others, but of instructors as well? What would you need? What do you have for that?
You speaking to me? I didn't.
Yes, Hanshi Legacy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the thing that I was thinking was that, you have to keep the art up to date. Like, not many of us have really faced anyone who's willing in a warring situation, or say somebody on the street who's trying to, I hate to use this word, but kill you. So, you have to have really good training in order to be calm in a situation like that, and what will work when you reach one of those situations, not the situation that's like two guys fighting over a girl or in a schoolyard or something like that. It's a true martial art where you train the mind to be calm and use the proper techniques that will work to save your life, and also, on the other hand, not to engage in petty quarrels with what you've been given that's so deadly.
Well said, Sensei.
Thanks, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here with Kyoshi Neil Stolsmark, who Sensei Dolphin is going to give a full introduction to. If you're watching on YouTube, we're so happy you're watching, and we ask you hit that subscribe and like button. As I always love to say on your podcast, if you're baking, if you're driving, if you're jogging through the woods, listening on the AirPods, we love it. We're glad you're here. Thank you. But if you're here on the Zoom call, and by the way, Sensei Stolsmark, you got some fans, because we got some numbers tonight. We got some people in the waiting room, or pardon me, not waiting, who are watching live with us right now, who've never been on our calls before. So whether it's some of the people who are instructors that you teach or your students, we're really grateful for you to have brought them, but also for them to be here. So for those of you who don't know our show, if you're here on the Zoom call, there's a chat button on the bottom, and we want your questions. They're going to get fired through to Andre, who's running the show tonight, and then he's going to fire them through to us. And assuming the questions aren't crap, we're going to ask them of Sensei Stolsmark. But no, truly, we're really happy you're here. We're really happy you're part of this living history that we're creating and that we've been doing ever since COVID. So thank you for coming and being a new part of the family. And I just want to say, I said it very quickly, but Sensei Dauphin, Sensei Nicholas Suino, Hanshi Gary Legacy, we find each other. We find each other. Someone's in one place, someone's in another place. We're all together. We're not together. We find each other. And that's the best thing I can say about my teachers, that they're worth finding. And for them, it's a two-way street. They find me back. So I'm so grateful to be a part of this family and that we find each other. Sensei Dauphin?
Oh, I'm so excited to introduce Kyoshi Stolsmark tonight. In Sensei Legacy's books, he's definitely not a quitter because he's been training in martial arts for over 40 years. And Sensei Stolsmark, Sensei Legacy says you got to be in martial arts for 30 years to not be a quitter. You have to be at least 30 years in. So you check that box. His arts are Okinawan Shorin, like Sensei Legacy and I, that I can see Sensei Legacy smiling. And he does Matayoshi Kobudo. We talked about this already, but I'm going to say it again. He's known as an insightful and precise teacher and inspires both young and old people. And he's a teacher of teachers. Many of his students include qualified martial arts and karate studio owners, like some of the people on the call. I know he's the Kobudo instructor of our good friends Mike and Laura Civic, who've also been on this show. In search for knowledge, Kyoshi Stolsmark has traveled extensively in the United States, Canada, Europe, Australia, Japan, South Africa, and obviously Okinawa. He's one of 8 people outside of Okinawa to represent 10th Dan Grandmaster Shugoro Nakazato, and he is an 8th Dan of Karate Do underneath Nakazato Sensei. As well, he's a 9th Dan in Okinawa Kobudo. Sensei Stolsmark is the president of the Okinawa Kobudo Doushi Rensei-kai and has been appointed successor by his teacher. Can you say his name for me, Sensei Stolsmark?
Gakiya Yoshiaki.
That is
Gakiya. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. He's also the owner and the operator of the Waukesha dojo in Wisconsin for 29 years, and also the Watertown dojo, also in Wisconsin, for 25 years. I don't know Sensei Stolsmark, but I mean, other than reputation, I was really excited when he agreed to come on here. I made Sensei Suino smile before you came on, because Sensei Suino's favorite martial arts movie, Sensei Stolsmark, is The Octagon. And one of your first teachers, Yamashita Sensei, was the main villain across from Chuck Norris in that movie. I also can tell you right now that Sensei Stolsmark he's a real badass fighter. He can make his karate work. And if you don't think he can, it's all over YouTube. A quick watch should be his episode on Masters of Karate on YouTube. Seen him knock a guy out on that with a back kick, a jump spinning back kick. Also fought in Okinawa and full contact tournaments and won those tournaments. And although competition's no longer on his radar, I'm just saying it that he did it and he did it well. The one thing that stood out in that I want to share with everybody is he was once standing next to this little known person called Rick the Jet Rufus. Ha ha ha. If you don't know who he is, like, you're on the wrong planet. Rick Rufus asked him, "Why are you doing this at this kickboxing match?" And he said, "I'm going to fight because I want to be a better teacher and I want to be able to teach from experience." And I think that's super cool.
Thanks.
I also like what your sensei taught you. Gakaki Sensei said, "Wah, wah, 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 harmony, everybody get along." And I can see that in your interviews and your personality that you've adopted that from your instructor. And like I mentioned, in our dojo in Legacy Shorin, one of our black belts, Sensei Legacy's grandson, is in your lineage of Matayoshi Kobudo, and he's studying very hard in that. And in Legacy Shorin, we're really proud of that. And I'm just super excited to have you on this show, Sensei, and hear your story, because I think it's an important story. And I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot of things from you tonight.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Sensei Dauphin. Well, Sensei Stolsmark, let's go right to you. Tell us what it was like for you growing up and what brought you into your first martial arts club.
Can you repeat that? You blipped out just a little.
Yeah, what was it like for you growing up, and what brought you into your first martial arts club?
Well, I was quite into athletics as a kid. I tried to play every single sport I possibly could. In the summertime, we did sports at the YMCA, and they offered judo, and they offered archery, and you name it. And so I tried to do all those things. And then in high school, I had a friend who was picked on, wasn't picked on, I'm sorry. I was picked on, and some other guys were picked on by this big football player when we were little guys, and they said, "Well, you never pick on my friend Adolfo. How come they never pick on Adolfo? Adolfo knows karate, you know." So, and we were like, you know, we were 16, 15, 16. I remember 16. I got my driver's license anyway, so I became good buddies with my friend Adolfo, and we did karate at lunchtime. We thought it was karate, right? It was something he had trained when he lived in Texas, and received his black belt. And so he taught us how to stretch and kick and things like that. And then there was a school in town at 17 that I went to called Yamashita Karate Studio, named after Sensei Tadashi Yamashita, owned by Dan Schrader. And I joined up there at 17, and that's the school I'm at now that I own. And it's not been 29 years and 25 years. It's been 39 and 35. So it'll be 40 years that I've owned this school next year. Yeah.
So tell us what it was about. I mean, that's become a lifelong thing for you. At what point did you know you were in for life? And what were those early days like? What were some of the workouts like? Are there any people that were memorable to you that you want to shout out?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think that when I joined, there might have been 6 black belts, something like that. And they were all really tough guys, And in order to grow up the ladder, you basically, you'd have to fight with all of them, spar with all of them. And there was just some really, really tough guys. And, once I got to the point where I was tougher than them, which happened, fairly quickly for me. By the time I was probably maybe 19 or 20, everyone wanted to learn from me. And the teacher, Dan Schrader, my first sensei, he saw that. And he just, when I achieved my black belt, he told everybody in the school, I don't care if you're a second dan or a third dan. If Neil is here, Neil is the teacher. And that's where it went. And after, a couple years later, he opened another school for me to run. And his life changed around. And he ended up taking that school and said, I can't do both schools. Would you like this one? And I took over, and I was 22 years old.
So help our listeners, especially maybe our younger or our newer people to arts. What was it about the way you trained, or the way you thought about it, or the way you focused that you think, I mean, we all have our physical gifts that maybe we didn't choose, but what about what you did choose set you apart from the others?
I enjoyed competition when I was young, any kind of competition. I wanted to play football, baseball, basketball, whatever. I'd be crazy about lawn darts, just fun stuff, right? And so the karate tournaments were a blast. And then, once I achieved the Shodan level, black belt level, I did it for the money. Because every time you go, you'd win $150 or something for the grand champion. Or so I did it to pay the rent. I really at the karate studio, because like I say, I took it over when I was 22, and I dropped out of college. I worked side jobs, sometimes as many as 3 jobs. I did security work in the evenings. Anything I could do to get by to keep the dojo going.
I love that. Hanshi Legacy, let's go to you for this question. Forgetting about, the gifts God gave you, you're somebody who leapt over a few people, so to speak. They started maybe at the same time of you or before you. What about how you trained made you separate from the others?
Well, I like to put it another way. What I'd like to say is about Sensei Stolsmark karate probably chose him. And by that, I mean, his sensei, from what I understand, you can always sense those persons. All your senses tells you this person is going to be in that lineage. He seems like that's the same as what happened to some of my students, like with Randy and Scott Byron and the guys that are with me now that have gotten as good or better than I am. So yeah, a good sensei looks for somebody to be better than him, not somebody that you're going to hold down from getting better than you. So, I believe that his sensei saw that in him.
Right
That's
on.
how I would yeah.
I am going to go to the other two senseis, but I want to come back to you, Sensei Stolsmark. I feel
Yeah.
like you're big in this idea about making your students better than you.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with Hanshi Legacy all the way. I think that that's the ultimate goal of any teacher, really, or any parent. You know, I mean, if you want your kid to do better than you want your student to do better than you. That's a, oh my gosh, that's a guaranteed way of thinking for people that think normal. Of course, you want your students to do better than you. Of course, you want your son to make more money than you, or your daughter to go further than you. I mean, that's an excellent way to put it, Sensei Legacy. Right on with that. I believe in that 100%.
Thanks, Sensei. Sensei Dofan, let's go to you. You know, you're a world champ. You separated yourself in many ways when you were younger. Aside from any physical gifts you were given, what do you think set you apart?
Well, one thing is not comparing myself to other people and just devoting myself to the art and my teacher and the training, right? Like I didn't come to the dojo and think I need to be better than this person or that person or this person. I just had goals and objectives, and I was going to do whatever it took to achieve those goals and objectives. That includes having a Iaido instructor who lives 3.5 hours away from me in another country and making a commitment for 30 years to go once a month and train Iaido with him, and then come back and diligently train 3 or 4 or 5 days a week by myself. When I moved away to Kitchener, I was not a black belt. I was a brown belt. And Sensei Legacy will tell you, I still drove back to St. Thomas 3, 4, 5 days a week to do my classes. I did 2.5 hours in the car. I never did any of that in comparison to other humans. I did it because I wanted what they had and I wanted to be good at it. And that's probably what separated me from other people. That wasn't my goal.
Great. Thanks, Sensei. I'm just laughing because of the idea that it's like,
Me
I'm
too.
2.5 hours down the road at the other purple belt. It's like, it's just the way you said it. I love it because it does make it sound so absurd if you would do that. Sensei Suino, what about you? We know you went to Japan and you absolutely shone as a young man. What, aside from your gifts that aren't yours to claim, what did you do that separated you from the others?
Well, the story is pretty common. You know, fall in love with martial arts, train hard and often, don't quit. I think that consistency is so important. I see that in my own students too. You know, I've got students that love martial arts and they do it for a long period of time, but maybe they're, out for 2 weeks and they come in, they train 3 nights 1 week and they're out a little bit, or they train really well for 9 months and then they're like, oh, I better take a couple months off and come back. So on top of the hard work and the talent and the luck and whatever else, the consistency, I think, other than the years I did gymnastics in high school, since the day I set foot in a dojo, I've trained, my life has been consumed by martial arts, right? And I still train, I still am in the dojo 3, 4, 5 days a week. 3 if I'm sick for the other 4. Right. I think consistency in martial arts and all other endeavors is a huge secret that not enough people pay attention to.
Thanks, Sensei Suino. And I want to be clear, I'm not being humble here. I don't think I separated myself from the pack much, but I do think I stayed in the pack. I never quit. And I had some rough years where I didn't train as much as I would have liked, but just kept coming back. And it's actually an old 12-step phrase, keep coming back. If your training's shaky, just come back tomorrow. It'll end up getting okay. Let's come back to you, Sensei Stolsmark. You're 22 years old. Your teachers, he's touched you. You're the guy. And now you're running what was the dojo you started going to. Talk us through that next little while for you.
So that it was a crazy part because Dan Schrader, Sensei Dan Schrader, who is now a 10th Dan, first 10th Dan from Sensei Tadashi Yamashita, and him and I are still very close. We get together 2-3 times a week since he's retired and I've retired from other stuff. Anyway, he called in 1984. He called Sensei Yamashita and said, "I got this kid. You remember the kid who just made Shodan last year? You know, black belt." He says, "And I can't take him any further. I want him to become your student." And he put me on the phone with him. It was New Year's Eve, and I was at his house, Dan Schrader's house, and I got on the phone with him, and I'd met him a few times, trained with, when he came to teach seminars here in Wisconsin. And, "Oh yeah, I know you, tall guy, long hair, yeah, okay, you come my house now," and that kind of language, And so that night, I set up and I flew to California, and I stayed a week with Sensei Yamashita, and ever since then we hit it off very well, and I became his private student, and for about 15 to 12, almost 20 years, I was his demonstration partner, and so he took me all around the world, introduced me to his teachers, Nakazato Shugoro Sensei, Matayoshi Shimpo Sensei, took me to Australia, took me all over the United States, and a bunch of times to Japan and a bunch of times to Okinawa, and we had a long time together. He would come to the Midwest in the United States, and I would drive him around, and we would do about a 14-day tour around the Midwest, Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, Indiana, anyway, Midwest, and we'd hit a different karate school every day, and we'd do seminars. And then I started to introduce them to some of my friends that weren't in traditional karate. They were, different guys, but they're good friends of mine that I met in tournaments, and they started to want, can you bring them to our school for 2 seminars? And I'm like, yeah, sure, And we did that for, like say 15, almost 20 years, 15 solid years while we were international. And then a couple of years later, we'd get together a little bit less, and we felt we had a falling out, no secret. And then, I started going to Okinawa, and then, I went with to Okinawa with him a lot, which was great, because he introduced me to all these very significant people. I mean, who's who of karate, right? I mean, you ask me about somebody, I'll tell you that I met him and had lunch with him, because I did. And after we went our separate ways, whatever, nothing really hard feelings, nothing like that. Just we just 2 bulls in the pen, and I wanted to do my own thing. He wanted to do his own thing, and that's what he did. So I don't know. Does that answer a question? Does that create questions?
Well, we're going to break this open a little, but I actually want to go back to an earlier one that I will just ask you and Hanshi Legacy. But there's a humility in a teacher saying, your Sensei Shader saying, "I've taken you as far as I can." And what does it take for a teacher to be able to pass off a student?
You asking me or Sensei Legacy?
I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go to Hanshi Legacy.
I haven't had that happen yet.
Right.
I haven't had that happen yet. I don't know about Sensei Legacy, or Hanshi Legacy, but do I see some people with some potential? Of course I do. I've got students, doing this long, 4.5 decades, owning the dojo since I was 22, coming up on 40 years. I've got students that have been with me almost that whole 40 years. And some of them are incredible athletes. On the other side of the coin, there's people that are just so loyal, and they'll never be Bruce Lee. They'll never be Chuck Norris. Of course, they're just people, but they're really good at what they do, and and they love the whole atmosphere, the whole vibe. The dojo is the way I run my dojo. although it's professional, it's not commercial. I don't have 200 students. I probably have 50, in my dojo. And I don't want any more than that because I want to know them all, So I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody out there, but.
Well, it does. And I think I was thinking about it even as much that your career in the martial arts wouldn't have been what it was if your teacher hadn't had that humility.
Yeah. I appreciate that so much, that's the way he thought that much of me, and like I say, we're together, we're tight. We're tight to this day. I took him to Okinawa with me, I don't know, 2018, and it was his very first time to travel anywhere. But I took him to Okinawa, and we just had the greatest time, and he was just blown away. It changed his life, he said. He'll be 79 this year. Wow. And and he started karate in 1964. So he's got 60 years of training karate. And he had never been to Okinawa, and I've been there 45 times. I've trained Okinawa 45 times. I know, ridiculous. I'm like a groupie or something. I don't know.
Hachi Legacy, I just want to ask you about that. Your first teacher felt maybe he didn't want to limit you and passed you off to Benny Allen. What did that feel like for you, and what does that take for a teacher to do that?
Again, I will say that I haven't given up yet, so I haven't passed any of my students on to anyone as far as that happens. But yeah, Harold Warden actually paid Benny Allen for 1 year of my lessons with him, because he again saw something in me, and I don't want to talk too much about that, but that actually happened to me.
Sure, I can see that.
Yeah.
But how grateful can you be to a teacher like that?
Yeah, that's pretty huge. So talk to us about Sensei Stolsmark. I want to throw it to Sensei Dauphin. He'll have some specifics, but about your time with your Okinawan teacher. So Sensei Dauphin, where do you want to go with these questions?
Yeah, I'm just interested, Sensei Stolsmark, on
Yes.
Yamashita Sensei, Nakazato Sensei. Like, we've already talked about your Kobudo master and lessons that he imparted to you. What lessons did you learn from Yamashita Sensei? Like, was it just technique? I mean, you're obviously very close to him. So what are you still passing forward to your students from these people? Or what stands out in your mind about them?
We brought Nakazato Shugoro Sensei over to Wisconsin here in 1989, and he was about 68 or 69 years old. And this is a great story for you, to me it is anyway. And he had asked everybody through a translator, Jiro Shiroma Sensei was actually translating, and he said, how many of you have been in karate more than 5 years? And quite a few hands were up. It's a seminar of 300 people. And then he said, how about 10 years? A lot of hands went down. 15 years. So this is 1989, right? So what is that, 35 years ago? And then it was 20 years. And there was like no hands up or something, back then. Because even the guys that are 80 years old now hadn't trained 20 years, 30 years ago. And then Nakazato Sensei fell to the ground, jumped on the ground, and he popped up really fast. And he said, how many of those years that you've been training have you been sleeping? In other words, he said, just because you started karate 10 years ago doesn't mean you've actually trained karate for 10 years. How many years were you, slacking off, right? Was his point. It was really the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And years later, on Okinawa, I wrote a letter and I had it translated, and I read it to him, and he smiled and he laughed. He says, I can't believe you remember that story. I said, it affected me in every way, because I thought to myself, every day I'm going to train as much as I can and get as much out of each day that I can doing karate. And I did it for years and years and years and years. I still do it. I'm 60, but I still, there's not a day goes by that I don't do karate, right? And that was cool. As far as training with Yamashita Sensei, he's a physical specimen that's just it's insane to understand. And he's 83 years old, and he punches like he's 21, and he was faster than anyone at 21, and he still is. And so, I catch him on the internet and stuff like that. We don't have a personal relationship anymore. However, he did just recently sign a bunch of magazine covers for me because he's still friends with our, a teacher to Dan Schrader Sensei. So that was nice of him to do that. So I don't want to get into any of that kind of political stuff, but as far as Yamashita Sensei, I mean, the guy would come into the dojo, he'd do 75 one-handed push-ups. He'd punch you and you couldn't see his hands move, and you'd feel your lips move. You couldn't see his hands move. You feel your lips move. He was a phenomenal, still is a phenomenal practitioner, athlete. He's one of a kind, without a doubt. I'll always love him. I'll miss him. And I wish him the best. I think it's amazing that he could go and make those movies and be Chuck Norris's evil brother, and the Octagon and the American Ninja and stuff like that, when he never did completely master the English language, as at least as an actor. I mean, he understands English, no problem, but that accent, probably cost him some roles, in the movies. I don't know. He did pretty well. If you ask me, I think he did fantastic. Sorry.
No, I'm a fan of the way he moves and trains, and watching him on the internet. And
yeah,
it's just nice to hear it from somebody who's actually, I've never been in his presence and you have. So
yeah.
Who wins if him and Chuck Norris fight in real life? Who wins?
Well, I'll tell you. Well, you want to hear a funny story? When they did the Octagon, they did an empty hand scene, and Sensei Yamashita made Chuck look so slow that they cut it out. and at the end of the movie, and oh boy, I'm going to say this. I don't care. At the end of the movie, Sensei Yamashita walks up behind him with the kamas, and Chuck stabs him in the back with a samurai sword, right? Well, they did that scene a couple times, and Chuck didn't like this, and the lighting guy didn't like this, and so they kept shooting it over and over again. And Sensei Yamashita, I don't know if you've never met him, but he's got, he's a pretty tough character, and he cut Chuck on the wrist and said, "No more retakes, Chuck," because Chuck kept wanting retakes. And he says, "No more retakes, Chuck." And Chuck had to go get some stitches. That's the last story I'm telling about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you don't see any memes about that.
No.
Hey, Sensei, there's a lot of footage of you getting punched or almost punched or thrown on stages with Yamashita Sensei.
Yeah.
That looked a lot of fun and pretty ferocious. What was that like?
Well, I tell you what, it looks real because it is real. One particular time we were in Okinawa, we went back to Okinawa, and he hadn't been to Okinawa in quite a few years. And he said, "Neil-san," he said, "you punch me hard as you can. You try to kill me because I had not seen Okinawa people for a long time, and they want to, I want to make sure they know that I'm still, this, that, good." And I'm like, "Okay, no problem." So he's going to warm up, and I punched him right in the face. And he staggered a little bit, and he's like, "Oh," and he grabs his jaw, and he's like, "Yeah, just like that. Just like that." I was so scared he was going to kill me, right? And anyway, we did a nice demonstration, and everything worked out fine. But yeah, I forgot your question.
Well, I just was commenting that the footage of watching you on stage with Sensei was pretty amazing to watch. And I just wondered what it was like, because certainly there were times when those fists were flying.
Yeah. Oh, well, I tell you what, Sensei Suno, the incredible skill level that he has, it's like, playing basketball. You want to go shoot hoops with Michael Jordan? That's what it's like doing karate with, with Sensei Yamashita. He's just that far above the rest of the world. He really is. There was a time when he was more famous than Bruce Lee. When Bruce Lee came out, Yamashita was more famous than him, in Japan. because he made a bunch of Japanese movies and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I was very honored, obviously, to be able to travel with him and do all that stuff. And I was in my 20s. I had no money. He paid for everything, and I was lucky. I was blessed. I was just totally blessed, and I'll always remember that and appreciate him for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Since I want to tag on to the Okinawa idea, you mentioned going there 45 times.
Mhm.
And who else who might not have been your direct instructor stands out as a martial artist? Or who do you go, wow, they really were?
Ishiki Hideyatada Sensei. He's my good friend now, Sensei as well. Been with him hanging out with him about 10 years, and we've gone all over the place together. France, Australia a couple times. I go to see him 2-3 times in Okinawa. And I've been hanging out with him about 10 years. My instructor, Gakiya Yoshiaki Sensei, he got sick. I thought I was never going to have another Okinawa person sensei, because Gakiya Sensei was the successor to Matayoshi Sensei, right? The guy who founded the whole thing. And even though I knew some other people, just on a chance meeting, my student in Boston, Fred Los, went to Shorinkan, and Fred's also a good friend, and he ran into Ishiki Sensei, invited him to the dojo, and Fred asked me if it was okay if he went, and he said, please, can you come with me? I said, sure, and I did. So exactly 10 years ago, 2014, we went there, and I just fell in love with the guy. He trains just trains so very, very hard, and he does. Besides Okinawa Kobudo, he also does the white crane and empty hand Matayoshi family style, and we just hit it off. And Fred Sensei, he went home, and I was there another week, and I went every single day, and I've gone back 2-3 times a year, every year for 10 years, and I just have a blast with him. And he was like the baby of the bunch of the Matayoshi Kobudo group. He's about, I think he just turned 68. I'll be 62, so we're pretty close in age. Everybody else is, mid 70s and later. So we just hit it off and train like maniacs. And he's an Energizer bunny. It's just so much fun. I didn't see it coming, and I just got so lucky. So many times I was Dan Schrader Sensei's #1 guy. I was Sensei Yamashita's #1 guy. I was Gakiya Sensei's #1 guy. And now I'm tight with Ishiki. I go to the airport, and I get picked up. I get turned around. It's hard for me to buy a meal when I go to Okinawa. Everyone takes care of me. It's just I don't know, living a dream, I guess.
So before we get to your 10 questions, which is a hallmark of our show, I just want to ask you, I'm not asking about your fallout, as you called it, but I do want to ask you, for people watching, what advice would you give somebody who does find that they and their teacher are two bulls a little big for the room? That must have been very difficult. And I imagine that took some dragon slaying on your part because of who teachers become to us. So what advice would you give her? What perspective do you have on that? None of us have that experience on this call, and I don't believe we will. And it's not a good or bad thing. I'm just curious what your journey with that is, and if somebody else had that journey, what you could help them with.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, I've been asked this question many times by many people. I sometimes feel like I'm more of a counselor than a sensei. But my answer, and if Mike Civic is out there listening, he asked me this exact same question that you just asked me, and some other people too, many others. And I said, follow the knowledge and follow your heart. Yeah. So if you're staying with something for political reasons, or like rank or something, and you're not, and the other person has more to offer you, go where the person has more to offer you. as far as, you know, your own personal journey, because that's what it is. We're all on our own personal journeys. And I think it's very important to realize that if you're going to get further, political is a bad word. What's a better word? If we're going to get further, you know, with your head above others, going this way, but yet you're going to learn more and you're going to enjoy more going this way, then go that way. Does that make sense?
100%. Follow your heart,
Okay.
follow the knowledge. That's a really beautiful saying. Sensei Suino, I know you'd
Yeah.
still be with your sensei if you could, but I do know that when you came back, you had to break down orthodoxy for yourself. You've talked about that on the show. So even though you never did, you know, leave your sensei, I believe that you had to have a period of reflection around what your heart and belief of the knowledge was. Do you want to comment on that at all? Because I think there's some parallel there.
Well, sure, I'll comment on it because I think it's useful for long-term martial artists. But let me be very clear: it was not a breakdown with Yamaguchi Sensei. I idolized him then, and he's passed away, but I still idolize him. But I was just curious after having at that point probably studied martial arts at least 30 years. I was just curious, and I decided I'm just going to put aside the orthodoxy and examine each and every principle or movement and make my own decision about whether it was worth preserving as is, or if there was some way I could advance it or change it. And I'm happy to report that 85% of what I learned from my teacher, I've kept as close as I can possibly reproduce it. But there was some percentage, 15, 20% of the things that I learned from my teacher that I think I now understand certainly better than I did when he was alive, when I was training with him. And so that I've changed them a little bit. And I think it lends more power to my martial art, better balance, better understanding of principle, more consistency, more efficient use of physical resources. But I did that with humility. And as I said, even though I emptied my cup completely, when I came back, I kept anyway 85% of what I learned from Yamaguchi Sensei.
I really appreciate that, Sensei. And part of the reason I asked you is because I know you'd still be training with him if you could. And I think it's important to realize you can do it within or without of your maintaining your path with your teacher. Sensei Stolsmark,
Yeah.
time for 10 questions. Are you ready?
Well, can I take a quick break?
If you need to take a quick break, you go for it.
Okay, 10 seconds, okay?
Absolutely. Hanshi Legacy, let's go to you with that question then. The idea that, you know, you would follow your heart and follow your knowledge even without leaving a teacher so that you refine what the style is for you. What was that journey for you in creating Legacy Shorin-ryu?
Well, I'm going to start by saying you're taking a martial art. You sometimes change teachers when they pass, for instance. That happened to me. But it's rare that if you have a good teacher that you're going to surpass them, because time is what makes you what you are. Yeah, the more you teach, the more you learn. That's the way it works, you know. And martial arts doesn't give up its secrets early to anyone, no matter how big you think you are, how big your head is. It takes years to realize some things, and you don't get them unless you bleed it out of the art. In my opinion, it takes like over 35 years before the martial arts will release any of its secrets to you. And you know, just because you hear your sensei give you the answers, it doesn't mean that you understand them. You need to do the time. So
You know, Sean, I will
that's
say,
why I
Sensei,
think.
I was going to say to you, Sensei, one thing that you said to me when you started training with Sensei Suino was you said, Randy, I didn't pick the highest ranking guy. I picked the best guy. That's in my head. I remember you saying that completely. You followed your heart. You said, I'm pick the highest ranking guy. I picked the best guy.
The guy, well, yes, but Now that I am there, in order for me to get the secrets out, means that I made my choice. It's not changing my teacher. It's following that way because I made a good choice. And nothing is going to be released to me unless I put my nose to the grinder. And you have to rediscover the martial art, just like Matsumura did, for instance. You can't just go and listen to a teacher tell you it. You have to relive that whole style. And it takes all those years to get all the answers. You know, somebody gives you an answer, you may not realize what you have to realize. You may not gain what you have to gain in order, say, on a physical level, face somebody who's standing there with a knife and he wants to take your life.
Before we do those 10
That's a life.
Yep.
That's a life-changing experience. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I don't know if it paused a little. I always want to give you time to answer. Sensei Suino, I just want to put a button because of what Hanshi just said, and then we'll go to the 10 questions with you, Sensei Stolsmark. Did you find, so you come back, you look at your art, you say 85%. But what Hanshi talks about often on the show is how time reveals secrets. So did you, like 20 years later, go, oh shit, I actually got to add back in 5% that I didn't understand at the time?
Interesting point. I'm not sure I would phrase it that way. But yes, martial arts secrets are revealed through time. And my understanding has definitely evolved. What I would say instead is I go back and I watch videos of my teacher and I still have aha moments. Right? It's like, damn it, that's what that guy meant when he said, you know, and you know, this is the last time I, you know, was in his dojo with him was 1992. So it's been some time since then.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Sensei Dolphin's overtly thinking it, but I'm going to say for me and him, time, which is for us a given, on the floor, on the mats, in uniform, sweating. Not just time since you joined. Sensei Stolsmark.
Yes, sir.
You answer your 10 questions impulsively, but then you can break your answers open as you wish.
Okay.
Sensei, what is the most effective move in your martial arts arsenal?
My brain.
Who is the most influential martial artist in your life?
Tadashi Yamashita.
Who do you believe is the most influential martial artist of all time, and why?
Tadashi Yamashita, because he and I don't think there's anybody that could kick his ass.
Sensei, we had you glitch a little on that, and we're real excited to hear your answer.
Freeze up.
Right now, you are still a little frozen on my screen anyways. But we're all real happy to hear. Ooh, yeah, there we go. Great.
I'm sorry.
You told us
I'm sorry.
that you believe is the most influential of all time, and we'd love to hear why.
I don't think there's anyone who can kick his ass.
Yeah. What excites you most about the next 5 years of your training?
Being able to do it.
Do you have a favorite film or television martial artist, whether they're a hyper legit martial artist or not?
Tadashi Yamashita. Sorry. The guy can absolutely not stand me, but I still love him.
Is there a martial artist in all of recorded history, living or dead, who you would like to train with the most?
Chosen Chavana.
If everyone in the
I
world,
saw-
yep.
I saw, somebody, a guy in San Francisco, a friend of mine, Sam Atai, his teacher, Clarence Lee, video Super 8 taped, whatever, and had it trained. And they had Chabana Sensei, Chosen Chabana, doing kata and stuff like that when he was already very, very sick with cancer. But anyway, I never knew any of that footage existed. And then he had played it on the internet. And to me, it was like walking through it was like going through the time tunnel. Like, oh my God, it's Chosen Chabana. It's like, he's the guy who called it Shorin Ryu, so yeah, I think it would be Chosen Chabana.
If everyone in the world could have the greatest benefit you've gotten from martial arts, whether they train or not, what benefit would they be getting?
From training martial arts?
Yeah.
Camaraderie.
And our last two questions, they come as a pair. What is your greatest achievement? What is your greatest regret?
Greatest achievement is my marriage. My greatest regret would be I think I have a regret.
Mm.
Sorry, I don't think I have a regret. When it comes to karate or martial arts, I don't have a regret.
Right on. I gotta ask you.
Yes.
You mentioned Yamashita 3, maybe 4 times during those 10 questions. I will tell you one thing. I'm not saying this show is going to somehow mend, broken fences or burnt bridges. But one thing a lot of us have learned on this show is that some old grudges maybe didn't need to last as long as they did. Is there a way, I'm not even saying as a student, that you and this gentleman could reconnect given the absolute respect you have for him?
I don't know. I mean, we used to stay in hotels and sleep in the same double bed. We'd share water bottles. We drink out of the same water bottle. We traveled all over the place together, to cars years at a time. And, driving down a country, I'll tell you this story of driving down a country road, and he started singing John Denver, Country Roads, Country Road, in his accent, country load, take home, to praise, I brew wrong, right? And so I stopped and get some gas, and there was a CD, John Denver's greatest hits, for $1.99, and I bought it and I put it in my Cadillac that we were driving around in from state to state. And so yeah, so many fond memories. I went with his teacher, right? I went with Shugoro Nakazato, which was his teacher since he was like 8 years old or 11 years old or something. And he accepted me because they had falling apart. So yeah, the chances of us doing, martial arts together again are probably pretty slim. Would I like it? Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just thought I'd throw that out. It's lovely to hear that even with not being together, the respect holds.
Oh yeah, the respect holds. But the guys that I've trained with, since going off, without him, he introduced me to a bunch of them, not all of them, but some of them. Matayoshi Sensei, Nakazato Shugoro Sensei, and Shugoro Sensei passed, Matayoshi Sensei's passed. Their top students became my teachers and my friends, and some of them have passed, and then I go with another, So I keep my options open. I'm not an association jumper. I don't go anywhere I don't really, I think I'm about as high as rank as I want to get. It's important as the head of an association that I have a certain rank so that I can, people deserve to get higher rank when they train for 30 and 40 years, right? And coming on 50 years probably. They deserve to get their 7th and 8th and maybe even their 9th dans eventually. And if I'm not at that point, then they're stifled, and that's not fair to them. I'm sure Sensei Legacy, I'm sure you agree with me. You have to move up, or your students can't move up, right?
Yes, I think I got lost on that there. I'm sorry.
Just the
Okay, I'm
idea
sorry.
that if you don't keep moving your rank up as the instructor, even if you don't believe you necessarily need to, your students can get clogged, and they don't get to
Yeah.
move in Kanchi Legacy.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, you've got to do what's right. You need to do what's good for the martial art. You sometimes don't necessarily make friends that way, but you have to do what's right. It's true. I mean,
Yeah,
you
I agree
don't.
with you, Sensei.
That's the only way you can. It's the only way you can see yourself going forward.
Yeah, and when it comes to that stuff, I have no problem backing up with whatever. If somebody, one of my senseis say, hey, Neil, you're supposed to be a 8th dan now, so you better be able to be an 8th dan. Good, it's a nice challenge for me. I'm gonna look like an 8th dan, and live up to that standard that they expect me to live up to, and I think that's a really important aspect or part of rank that people don't get, that your instructor is entrusting you to be that level of what they give to you, or acknowledge that you're at that level, and you got to live up to that. I think that's the coolest part about the whole thing. Not for yourself, I'm with this rank. No, my sensei says I'm this rank. That's why I have to practice this hard and be this good, and be able to pass it on. That's the part I like about it. I really do. People say, "Oh, I don't care about rank." Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Yeah.
You have a duty, as when you get into those ranks, you have a duty. You have a samurai tradition, and it's your duty to do those things, regardless of what else happens.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Hanchi Legacy. I agree with you 100%.
Thanks, Hanchi. Sensei Dolphin, let's go to you to pop into to the Kobudo question. That's something you know a lot more about than I do, so I'll let you lead the charge on these questions.
Yeah, Sensei Stolsmark, just
Yes.
when was Kobudo something? I know you do Matayoshi Kobudo, but how did that start? Where did that start? When did you start with the Kobudo, and how's that going now? I know you're the inheritor of that system, like you're the
Yeah.
which I think
1980.
cool, that a white guy is the inheritor of the Okinawans have to come to you to learn their Kobudo and get their rank certification.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, hey? Yeah. 1980, I started. So it would have been about, let's see, that would have made me 17 or 18 years old, just shortly after karate. Yamashita Sensei actually had trained with Matayoshi Sensei when he was a kid. And so I didn't learn the Kobudo from Nakazato Sensei's Kobudo. He's a different Kobudo system, and I don't do that. And so I started right fresh off the boat there. And then 1990, Matayoshi Sensei came here to Wisconsin, and about 3 months, no, not even a month later, I went to Okinawa for the first time and did a demonstration. And 2 years later, I took a bunch of students there, stayed at Sensei Matayoshi's apartment. He put us all up for free, which was nice of him. I probably had, 12 or 15 students. And then I just got really into it, and went back to Okinawa. Like I say, I've been there 45 times now. So every time I went back, it really wasn't for karate, it was for Kobudo. Yeah, and got to meet Sensei Matayoshi's top students. Became, #1 student of Gakiya Yoshiaki Sensei and he was named successor by Matayoshi. When Matayoshi Sensei passed away, he named him as a successor. Ran the place for 5 years, and then really didn't get along with his son, basically, and wanted to go on his own. So my teacher's been dead for 5 years, and I'm not making any decisions. So he went on his own, and he told me, and he apologized. And I said, "You're not going to believe this, but yesterday I left Yamashita Sensei." And I said, "Can I be your first student?" And that's how it happened. Crazy, hey? And then and then 10 years later, he had a stroke, got sick, and then said, "I'm going to shut this thing down unless you take it over." And I said, "I'll take it over. Why don't you give it to an Okinawan?" I go, "People aren't going to follow me. I'm not Okinawan." He goes, "Only teach who wants to learn." It was the smartest thing I've ever heard in my life. He said, "Just teach who wants to learn, Neil." And I said, "Okay." So going strong. It's tripled in membership. Shit, it's more than that, quadrupled in membership at least. There's 10, 12 branches in Canada, largely due to Sensei Mike and Laura Civic. Have done a great job spreading up there. I could name a whole bunch of people. Sensei Noah Mitchell in New York, and Mike Norvell in St. Louis, and Fred Lose in Boston, and just I can't list them all, but and we've been going. It's over 20 years now that association's been going, and I think we're up to, I don't know, 365 Shodans that made Shodan in those 20 years. It's not a million. Some people do 365 Shodans in a weekend, but this is authentic. This is, this is real. This isn't dinero.
Do you have a favorite weapon, Sensei? Do you have one that you like more?
I'm gonna have to go with the Tonkwa, or Tonfa. People say Tonfa, Tonkwa. Yeah, probably that one. Yeah, it's a lot like karate. So, yeah.
And how does the ranking and weapons progress in the Matayoshi system that you're teaching? You started as a white belt and you're learning what, and then how are you moving through the ranks?
Sure. So the 4 basic Kobudo tools, we call them tools, we don't call them weapons, are bow, #1, the sai #2, tonfa #3, nunchuck #4. Okay, so you get through those, you probably do those for 4 or 5 years, and then 3 or 4 years. And the next one is the kama, that sickle, and the next one is the eku, the bodor, and then the next one is the nuntibo, which is a spear, backward sai on the end, and then there's about 15. And then we go to garden hole, or call it a kwe. A lot of people say kwa or gua, but old Okinawans say kwe. And then Sansetsu-kun, 3-section staff. Let's see, little bitty nunchuck, chisai Sansetsu-kun, little bitty nunchuck with 3 sections. Timbe, a shield and a sword. And what else? Oh, a bunch of stuff. Muge is like the horse bridle nunchuck looking thing. Those in there. Teiko, we call Okinawan a knuckle duster, like a brass knuckles almost. They maybe come from horseshoes or horse feet. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but there's about 15 or 17 different tools weapons that I do.
And are those in the Matayoshi system, are they pulled? I'm going to make a statement that I might be wrong about. Matayoshi Sensei couldn't invented all of the katas in the system that you do.
No.
He pulled them in. He collaborated, like he pulled them in and made the system from different people. Is that a correct statement?
That is a correct statement, and not only that, but so people say Matayoshi Kobudo. He never called it that. I never call it that, because so many people had influences, right? So especially like the older guys that are they're starting to go away now. but they would go to different Kobudo teachers, like this guy from this village. Oh, he's got this really cool bow kata. So they'd go and they learn this bow kata. They bring it back to the dojo, and then they would matayoshiize it. They'd make it look like the rest of the kata, right? And yeah, I know a lot about history that I've never told anybody because I got it firsthand, right? I didn't read it and I didn't see it on the internet. And anyway, they would go to this place and find this kata, come back, and everybody, oh, we like that, right? Well, they had to get it organized, and Matayoshi Sensei is the one who did it because Kobudo was disappearing, in the 60s, and so 72, I think he opened up the Kodokan, which is his dojo, and they decided on these many katas, right? Well, I have the original of how many kata, and they cut it down. Like they had 11 bow kata. The dojo only 5, but other guys still remembered the other kata. And then there was even more than that, and there was more of this sai kata here, sai kata there, da 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 da. So they had to streamline it somehow. I mean, you can't do 900 kata, right? But the basic idea is you're 100% correct. No, it was not Matayoshi Sensei, and he didn't want that responsibility. He was like, no, we're gonna keep Kobudo going, but this guy taught this guy brought this guy brought that. Yeah, so you're 100% correct. And a lot of people, they say Matayoshi Kobudo, Matayoshi Kobudo. My teacher, Gakiya Sensei, when he left the family, he asked, could I say Matayoshi Kobudo? They said, no, you can't use that name. He said, okay. And you can't use that symbol. He said, okay, made his own symbol, changed the name to Okinawa Kobudo Doushi Rensei-kai, which in layman's term means a bunch of friends who want to train Kobudo. That's what it translates to. And to this day now, there's so many people out there that are probably watching this and are going to be mad at me that say, call their art Matayoshi Kobudo. They don't have permission. They don't have the right, and they're wrong. How's that?
Well, that's a great lead into a question that we have from
Okay,
Steve,
good.
who first off, thank you for your comments, Steve. Steve said, I would like to say I've really been enjoying the questions that the hosts have been asking. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. We're really glad you're with us tonight. Stolsmark Sensei, when will you be coming up to Canada to visit and share your knowledge with your OKDR family up here again?
Sensei Michael Civic says August.
There you have it. You heard it here first. You don't have the right, so you're wrong, and he's coming up in August.
Okay.
On that note, I want to thank Robert Shlumsky, Justin Shea, Andrei Sedashev, Alden Adair, Jesse Villay-Vitao, Sydney Dauphin, Josh Kitchens, Christiana Landol, Daniel J. Holland, Dridi Giuliani, and Stavros Stavroulias. They run the show behind the scenes. So Sensei, what we're going to do is we're going to go around the horn and talk a little bit about our time with you, including myself, and then the last word will go to you, and then we'll say goodnight. So Hanshi Legacy, what do you want to say about our time tonight with Sensei Stolsmark?
Oh, it was good to finally meet you. Not quite in person, but maybe in August.
Yeah.
I learned a lot of different things about what my grandson's new path is. And, I think you enlightened a lot of different people about Kobudo. Some things were rather strange, like that, that it almost died out, stuff like that. Just small things that you realize sometimes it's just a thread that hangs on to styles from the past. So thank you for coming to our show. I appreciate that very much, and hopefully in August I will come with my grandson to see you.
Oh, that would be so wonderful, Hanshi. I appreciate your kind words.
Thank you, Hanshi. Sensei Suino?
Sensei, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed hearing about karate and Kobudo from your perspective. I watched a lot of video in the last hour and a half. As you mentioned names and people, I would pull them up in the last minute or so. I was watching some of that Chibana Sensei footage that you mentioned, and it's really interesting. And sometime when we're not on on live, I'd like to ask you a few questions about that. Maybe you have some insights into how he moved and how it relates to what folks are doing in modern karate. But we'll save that for another time. Anyway, thank you so much. It's been great to talk to you, and I hope we run into each other in person.
Absolutely, Sensei Suino. Thank you.
Thanks, Sensei Suino. Sensei Dolphin?
I write always, Sensei, I write always copious notes. And I wrote many pages of notes, so I'm not going to be able to read them all, or we're going to be here until like midnight with me regurgitating these things back to you. I really like that you said that you put real karate on your first dojo. More people should have the balls to do that. I might do it tomorrow, actually. I might take a page out of your book and do it tomorrow. Once again, the YMCA and judo was mentioned on this show by a martial arts master. I like this. I don't know. Aldolfo knows karate. Aldolfo knows karate. It just sounds like it rolls off the tongue so nicely, right? That you're a high school buddy. That's why he wasn't picked on. I like the stuff you said about Sensei Schroeder, Dan Schroeder. I've never, obviously, must be a super cool person to have recognized the thing in you and then started a dojo for you and then eventually said, why don't you just take over this one that I'm running? I just think that's a really cool thing that happened. I also like when you said you competed to pay the rent and you dropped out of college and you worked 3 jobs to keep the dojo going. That seems like a similar story of a lot of people of your generation. You made it better for all the rest of us to be able to do it a little easier. You and Sensei Legacy have some common ground. As Sensei Legacy mentioned, his first instructor also decided to pass him forward to somebody that he thought would be better qualified to teach him. Been to Okinawa 45 times. I can relate. I've been there once. Anyway, I like that story that you said that Nakazato Sensei told about, you've been in karate for 10 years, but how much have you trained in 10 years? That's something, as I've been in karate longer and longer, something that rattles around in my brain, especially when you go train with people and maybe they are the same rank as you, but you could just tell they don't have the same sweat equity that you have on the mat. I like that you said, follow your heart and the knowledge. Don't worry about politics and rank. I like that. And then you're the first guest who's mentioned the same person 3 times in the question, Yamashita Sensei, which I think is awesome. He's been on my radar since before I was in martial arts. I agree with you. I loved all his movies. You could tell in his movies how skilled he is. I think it's super cool that you had such a great relationship with him. And I really, truly hope that in the future, you never know what will happen. And I hope something good happens that brings the 2 of you back together again, because it sounded like a great partnership and a great relationship. I like when you said you have to live up to your rank. More people should do that instead of just wrapping the belt around their waist and telling people that that's what they are. And then the last thing you said, which was from one of your teachers, just teach who wants to learn. Sensei, you're a really genuine person. I like your sense of humor. I like your approach to talking. And I was going to say, I hope we can meet, but we're friends with a lot of the same people. So it's inevitable that we are eventually going to be in the same room together. And I look forward to that.
Oh, me too. Thank you.
Sensei, I just want to say really quickly, because I get to guide so much of the show, but obviously follow your heart, follow the knowledge. I've got that written here. That's my meditation for the week. But there's something else you said where you said I did it for the money. And I just want to say, when I was in early sobriety, a buddy of mine was like, I think I am only going to the AA meeting to see if the really hot girl's there. And I said, that's okay. If that's what gets you there, go. Now that guy's no longer going to try and see that girl, but he's 15 years sober. And the idea that initially you might be like, I just need the money. I want to win the tournament. I think that's valid. And then here you are 40 plus years later, I'm guessing that might not be the driving force. I love the nobility in the martial arts. I love the deep, selflessness, but we're also allowed to be in it for earthly means. it'll keep you there, and then you'll end up wanting more or less of those. But I really like how honest you are about that. We don't talk about that as much. And, it can't diminish the arts, but there's a clear sense that it doesn't diminish yours just to also want to get paid for it, or at least back when you were in your 20s. So thanks for that. I really smiled at that. And I just want to throw the last word to you, Sensei.
Yeah. What would you like me to say?
Whatever you want to say goodnight to our guests with.
Well, who's ever out there listening, I appreciate this time, and I appreciate you guys, Sensei Dolphin and Sensei Legacy and Sensei Swing, and you to invite me onto this show. I'm honored, I'm humbled, and I hope that I didn't bore anybody with too many stories. I can get long-winded. I've had a lot of experiences in the martial arts and with a lot of people and famous people, and I guess I just want to say thank you. Thank you, and I had fun talking with you guys tonight, and I hope I get to meet you all in person soon.
I think you will. Thank you, Sensei. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel.